Kelsang's going to talk about going to touch on his remarks and insights about distinct cultures and mass products. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Moy. Thank you, Hewlett. It's good to be here on behalf of the Tibetan Association of Northern California and Wiser Earth. And if I could just start off on a personal note before really getting to the brief, which has to do with distinct cultures and mass products. Well, how many of us really get a chance to really combine your sort of spiritual practice with your work? And that's how I see kind of my work with Wiser Earth. Every morning, almost every morning actually, the first thing I do is when I switch on the computer, I go on to wiserearth.org and look at just the recent activities. And when I see the dozens and gradually the hundreds of people who are sort of spending time on the site, adding an organization or adding a resource or or sharing some knowledge, for me, these are like really, for me, a true philanthropist because they are donating their time, their intellectual capital, and are motivated by a sense of wanting to serve and not really seeking any reward in return. And just the mere act of getting onto the site and adding an organization or some sort of an entity, it seems to take on some spiritual dimension for me because, somewhere, some obscure organization which may not sort of really see the light of day, it never sort of comes onto the desk of the funders or makes its way into the dockets, but they exist. They're somewhere trying to make some change at the grassroots level. So just a mere fact of being able to sort of make that contribution and add it into this growing pool of information, which really is what Wiser Earth is all about. For me, that's sort of it's akin to really doing my little meditation in the morning. So that's what sort of motivates me, and the same sense of wanting to be of service has sort of led me to contribute my time and sort of my energy into helping out sort of the Bay Area Tibetan community. So onto the brief. The Tibetan community in Northern California is really small. It's about less than 2,000 people, and it's really young as well. The majority of them came here in the early 90s thanks to a special bill that got passed in the U.S. Congress, which enabled about 1,000 Tibetans to immigrate to the U.S. So it's a very young community, but not surprisingly, sort of the forces of mass sort of culture, the mass cultural products have definitely encroached and have sort of created stress on sort of the cultural identity. And this is most apparent in sort of the erosion of language, some of the traditional practices, in how sort of the food habits, and sort of just in some general norms. And even though some of the mass values have taken hold and sort of have been adopted sort of en masse, but I feel sort of happy to sort of share with you sort of the fact that the community is far from being sort of homogenized, that the community here has been able to maintain its distinctiveness. And I sort of attribute that largely to efforts being made to protect the language, the role of the elders, sort of the strong, the vibrant sort of spiritual practices of the community, and just the overall vigilance of the community. And I can't sort of emphasize the importance of language enough because I think culture is really embedded in language, and language sort of expresses the culture. So that's kind of just kind of a brief view on the community here. And in terms of can distinct communities and mass products sort of coexist? It's a tough one, but in the case of the Bay Area Tibetan community, I think we're sort of managing that balance. And just by way of examples, when we have community events, it's really interesting to see kind of you have on the one hand members coming out on stage and sort of performing their sort of operas and sort of other sort of traditional dances and songs, but then just as easily and smoothly they kind of transition into the next segment of the event, which sometimes has to do with rock music, or people kind of just performing very contemporary sort of events. And again, I mean, another example that I wanted to share with you here is just recently I was sort of invited to visit a community member's home. This is a young man, maybe in his mid-30s. I mean, I don't know him that well, and the few times that I've seen him in community events, he's always come across to me as someone very contemporary in his attire, in his mannerisms. So it really surprised me when I went to his house that the first thing he did was actually, he took me to his room where he had his altar. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Tibetan culture, but that is kind of almost every home, regardless of the size and your your social economic status. Every Tibetan home here, some may be grand, but some very simple. But everyone has an altar where you have your little deities and where you kind of actually go there for maybe just for a few minutes a day or maybe every other day. But that's where you kind of just get to do a little practice and just step back a little bit. So I was really surprised to actually be invited by this person who I hadn't sort of pictured him in that way. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that that this coexistence is manifested in both in terms of how we organize the events, but also sometimes in individuals themselves, because they may appear, they may look some way, but then if you get to know them a little bit, you see that they have this other side to them as well. So I mean, I left feeling pretty good and pretty positive that this person has been able to sort of keep his practices and sort of traditions, intact, and along with so many other things that he obviously does. And in terms of, what sort of distinct cultures and communities need, I'd say, it's tools, technical assistance, obviously funding. Again, I can't emphasize enough the role of elders and even the role of women. I can get to that a little later. And again, I think a community needs to have some strong spiritual traditions. And I highlighted the role of women because many of the traditions are very oral in their character. So usually it's the woman that's kind of like the initiator, that's the one that's transmitting a lot of the habits, the norms, and the basic education. And in communities that I've seen where women are active, in terms of community events, it seems like that community is that much more vibrant. And this is where I guess the community aspect really merges with how a sort of a Web 2.0 platform like Wiser Earth really comes into play. And I think something like the Wiser Earth tool is helpful because it enables distinct communities like the Tibetan community, for example, to really find some new ways to preserve, document, and bring their culture alive to the audiences. So we're definitely using Wiser Earth for project planning, for archiving our documents, for videos, for networking, for disseminating information to the community. So it's been a great tool for us. And as far as Wiser Earth itself, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to check the site out and explore it a little bit. It really came out of Paul Hawkins' new book called Blessed Unrest. The paperback version actually will be out in a month's time. And in this book, Paul makes a really powerful case for how the two movements, the environmental movement and the social justice movement, are coming together to kind of form one large movement, what he calls the world's largest movement. And Wiser Earth is really a companion project to this book. And what Wiser Earth is, it is a global directory. It's a networking platform. I have that up on the screen here. We already have over 108,000 organizations on the database. And the other entities include resources, events. The newest feature is something called Groups, which enables communities come together and form their own little communities on the site. And I would definitely encourage you to check it out. And it's definitely multifaceted. It has there are some aspects which obviously overlaps with the various social networking sites you have out there. But I think it's more than that. It's really the values-based, the non-commercial alternative to, say, Facebook or MySpace or the dozens of other sites that are out there at the moment. And if I can sort of just make one case for Wiser Earth, it is like the user base is quite small right now, but I think that the value proposition for Wiser Earth is it's really trying to map the relationships between people in terms of who are friends, who are members of particular groups, who's contributing content, key content to the site, and also and who's interested in what topics. So what it represents is it's a network of relationships, and when you sort of scale it on a scale of, say, 50,000 to 100,000 plus members, which will happen at some point. I mean, it's small now; it's about 10,000, but I could see in a year's time or so the numbers could just grow exponentially. So when that happens, what's going to happen is there will be the ability to sort of actually find out, who are the opinion makers of, on key ideas. Who are the gatekeepers. Who are the people that are contributing key content. Who are the experts, and who are the bridge builders. Who are, or what are the areas where the network is weak and that needs to be, needs reinforcement. So I think these are data points. These are sort of, again, what's going to happen is you're going to have visualization software and sort of mapping tools which will sort of be layered over the data. So I think once that's up and running, I think it's going to be a great tool especially for funders, I'd say, because it's going to enable you to tell who's doing what, where, where the money's going, and sort of the key points which I think will be helpful in your work.
Thank you, Kelsang. Questions? Questions, comments? I really just want to make a note. We have 2 more speakers to go. I am so pleased that all of you are staying, and your patience and your continued engagement. So I just want to touch that. It's not easy to sit for long periods of time, even with fabulous speakers.
Also, just one brief announcement. I have here 4 copies of Bless and Rest, so it's complimentary. So if people are interested, please help yourselves.
Thank you.
Ken Wilson. Thank you, Francis.
I know with all of these speakers, we all want to ask many questions, but we're trying to respect the others who are following. But Kelsang, this was wonderful. And so your part of your answer is that, even as the web in a certain way will homogenize by making information the same things available to everyone in the world. What you're saying is that we can create, or we are creating, corners of the web which celebrate the ability to us to get to a level of texture and self-expression that we otherwise wouldn't be able to have.
Definitely, yeah. I think what tools like Wiser Earth does is it makes the site more accessible because, I mean, the web is still fairly chaotic and very intimidating to a lot of people. So what Wiser Earth does and other sort of similar sites is it enables kind of more access and the creation of separate little communities where you can actually be amongst yourselves. But again, if you want to connect with the bigger world out there, you can do that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelsang. Thank you. Dave.